Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gail Carson. Welcome to Living Regret Free, a program that shows you how to live a better and more joyful life. As an added bonus, I invite you to listen to an introduction to my Mindset Matters program, which ties into this so well. Go to www.sobmindset.com. It's free, and I know you will enjoy it. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at gailcarson13@gmail.com or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter. My guest today is Gabrielle Birkner, and as you know, this month is dedicated to the Miami International Book Fair. Gabrielle, along with her co-author Rebecca Sofer, has written a book called Modern Loss, and it's a candid conversation about grief. Both women bonded over their pain, isolation, and search for resources that spoke to them. They created a website about the messy and darkly hilarious experience of loss in the long haul. Its essential message of resilience and hope quickly turned into a movement with a goal of a no-holds-barred approach to discussing grief and empathy. Well, welcome, Gabrielle.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I've got to read a couple of reviews on your book. Mindy Kaling, who everybody knows from TV and is the author of Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me, said, "I am not sure how a book about grief could also be witty and entertaining, but Modern Loss accomplishes just that." And Stephen Colbert, who everybody knows from CBS, The Late Late Show, or The Late Show, says talking about loss can feel very scary. This book isn't. It's about grieving deeply over the long term and the reassurance that you're far from broken because of it. These surprisingly funny and candid stories aren't about death. They're about life and thriving in the face of loss. So tell us a little bit about how all of this came to pass. What are some of the things that went into making all of these stories either funny or tragic, and how you and Gabrielle bounded? I mean, you and
so actually I'm
Rebecca.
Gabrielle, but yeah, it was Rebecca and I. So I can start a little from the beginning, which you mentioned a little in your intro, which was that Rebecca and I came together. I was in my late 20s. Rebecca was around 30. We had both lost parents much younger than most of our contemporaries. So a lot of our friends just hadn't had similar experiences of going through grief. And although they wanted to do right by us, and many really tried to, they didn't know what to do. In my case, I was 24 when my father and stepmother were murdered. So most of my friends really hadn't lost parents, let alone known anyone who had been murdered. Rebecca tragically lost her mother in a car accident and her father a few years later. So here we were, young adults. We came together originally at a dinner party convened by another friend who just wanted to bring together a bunch of women she knew and loved but didn't necessarily know each other, to open this conversation about grief and loss, something that is universal as anything else in this universe, and yet something that's still surprisingly taboo to talk about, something that still scares us to talk about, that we can't really explore all the aspects of what it means to live with loss, not just in the weeks and months and year after, but forever. So Rebecca and I came together, and we had worked in media, the two of us, for a combined 2 decades. Rebecca was a television producer. I am a journalist. And we saw this white space, this hole in the digital universe, where we said we could create something where people who are our contemporaries, but really everyone, all ages, but people willing to talk candidly on this topic, can go to share stories and to hear stories, to find resources that really we thought would speak to a generation of people who are digital natives or are, technology plays a big role in how they are grieving.
So when you got together at this dinner party, and I guess conversation rolls around to all of this, um, how how did how did you come together to talk about these things and not kind of grieve more?
I guess it wasn't about like constraining our grief, but I remember feeling when I left that initial dinner party, and that was several years before we launched our web platform, modernloss.com. But I remember leaving that initial dinner party and just like feeling like I had exhaled for the first time in many years, because it wasn't about, we could both share what was painful about our loss and share just what the reality of our life is now. Like knowing that we had some kind of outlet was incredibly comforting. And, it didn't make the pain worse. It really, truly made it better.
Well, that's important. And, so you came together, and did you formulate the website first and then write the book, or did you formulate okay. And what happened from that? I mean, were you trying to get Yeah.
So what we did was in late, we launched the website. We're coming up on our 5-year anniversary. And in that 5 years, we've told more than 500 personal narratives on this site. Plus, we have a huge backbone of resources. But we came together to create this site and launched it, press play, in November 2013. When we were both hugely pregnant. I was like 6 months pregnant, and Rebecca was 8 months pregnant. And so we definitely we see the irony, of that, starting a site about death and grief when we're about to give birth. But we really wanted this out in the world and to exist, and we just didn't know how it was going to be received. And that's partly because in the process of creating the site, when people were like, hey, what are you up to these days? They knew us as, media professionals, and we would say, oh, we're working on this site about grief and loss, and it's geared towards, 20s and 30s. We got a lot of, strange looks, or people who looked at us or thought that we were super creepy for taking on an endeavor like this. So when it came out into the world, we had no idea how it was going to be received. We didn't know if this was just like something that was going to be a small passion project that spoke to a committed group of people, spoke to, a small group, a large group. But when it did launch, we were so surprised and heartened to see that not only just how many people were interested in reading it and writing for it and telling the story, telling our own backstory of how we came together to create it and why we thought it was necessary. So in that, it was a website. It was our passion project. It became a website. It became more than a website, an online community of people who are speaking candidly about this topic that's so often taboo in polite company to talk about. And then we got a lot of press early on, and I think it really speaks to the energy and the force behind what we were trying to do and the conversation we were trying to have, and how it's always timely, it's always relevant. But I feel like we were at a moment where people were willing to break open the conversation a little bit. And then out of that, we decided a natural extension of our brand, of our website, of our community, of our movement would be a book. And in this book, as you mentioned, Rebecca and I write extensively both about our own personal losses and what happened to us in the aftermath, and also how we came together to create modern loss. But the book, in addition to that, includes 44 essays from various contributors who write on a range of topics, from sex to technology to the secrets that we harbor. And and it all sort of works together to tell the story, these small, narrowly focused journeys about what happens to people after loss. And even if your story is completely different, even if you've lost someone different than the writer, in a different way, the timeline's different, the location's different, there's a kernel in each and every one of these essays that I feel like everyone who's experienced the loss of someone they love or the loss of someone they've had a complicated relationship with can connect to. I can give you an example, which is we have a piece by a woman named Jacqueline Murakatete. She lost her whole family when she was just, I believe, 9 years old in the Rwandan genocide. And while most people won't go through anything like that, what she writes about is going back to Kigali, going back for the first time to Rwanda. She's now a lawyer in New York City, and what it was like to go home to a place that no longer feels like home. And though her experience is so different from what most people who experience loss will ever go through, I think that anyone who's lost someone and had to go home after and feel and sense that the place was different will connect to this essay on a really visceral level.
Well, it's really, I think the compilation that you've put together is absolutely amazing. And the illustrations that you have are very unique and have a message all their own. So how did you determine what the illustrations were going to be?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning it. We worked with this incredible illustrator named Peter Arkell, and he's extremely creative, does work for the New York Times and the New Yorker and many other publications. And when we found him, it was kind of a mind meld because we had ideas about what we wanted, how we wanted it to be illustrated, which was not, which had some life and levity to it. We wanted the illustrations to sort of mirror the energy of the book. And he worked through different sketches, and we gave our ideas. He provided his own ideas, and we really think they came together beautifully. Each essay in the book has its own full-page color illustration, and then in between our chapters, we have cartoons and sort of like more story, we have cartoons that tell stories and that provide resources, everything from what you should know before scattering ashes to how to survive small talk in the aftermath of loss, to how to build your crew of friends when you're grieving. And we have one thing that ran in the New York Times that falls into this category is a illustrated glossary that we created, and it's called Grief Speak. And if you want, I could read you a couple of the entries.
Well, if you'd like to read just a couple, I don't want to take the entire show for that. So if you would read something that is hilarious, because I would like to understand how that is, and then read something that is not hilarious. That would be a great illustration.
Sure. So in our brief guide to Grief Speak, we call it some language that's probably not used in counseling manuals, but we think you should know anyway. Here's one example of our illustrated glossary. Edible arrangement. Fruit skewers whittled into floral bouquets, frequently received en masse in lieu of actual comfort, may contain a marshmallow at the center. Triggers, because we all have triggers when we lose someone, and they're often very idiosyncratic, and you don't know when they're coming. Triggers, whatever takes you back to your dark place, frequently appearing in such seemingly innocuous forms as found notes Adele songs and other Adele songs. So, and we have, they're arranged by alphabetical order, just like a dictionary entries. But they have really amazing small illustrations, like a birthday cake with the word "ugh" on it, or an edible arrangement. Because you get a lot of people, as I mentioned, like people want to be helpful, but they don't know what to do to be helpful. So Rebecca especially likes to talk about how many edible arrangements she got. People didn't know what to say, but she had 14 arrangements on her countertop when she lost her mom.
Well, it's funny that you're mentioning these things, because even in illnesses or other situations, and people don't know what to do, and sometimes they just ask, what can I do to help, or what can I do to make it easier for you, or that kind of thing, rather than saying I know how you feel, or I'm so sorry, but say, how can I help you? What can I do to make it easier? What can I do every day for you? That sometimes is better than anything else. Now, I don't know, as someone who has experiences, what is your recommendation? Because our listeners sure would like to know. What is your recommendation if someone finds himself in a situation where they do have to comfort a friend and they don't know what to say? Okay, so what would you say, Gabrielle, if you were giving someone advice as to how to treat someone who is going through this tragedy? What should they say, or what should they do, or how do you want them to feel, or how do you feel? Give us an answer so we become smarter at what we do.
Right. Yeah, there's no one stock answer that's going to make every person who is bereaved going to feel better at any given moment. Grief is so personal. It's so idiosyncratic. One thing I recommend to people who have experienced a loss, and this was super helpful to me in the aftermath of my own losses, is to really tell people what you need, because people want to be helpful, but they don't necessarily know how they can be helpful to you in any given moment. And it's very easy to be angry or bitter or just confused about why people who love you aren't doing right by you. And often it's just because they don't know what or how. But if you give them some tips, if you say, I want you to come over with a stack of celebrity weeklies and just have dinner with me and talk. I want you to come and take a walk in the park with me. I need groceries. If the more specific you can be, the people who want to do right by you, you give them an opportunity to really be there for you and to be helpful. And it's unfortunate, I know, that the onus is on the person who's grieving, who already has a lot on their plate emotionally and logistically and otherwise. But if you give people help them help you is a big piece of advice I often give. The more direction you can give on what you need, what would be helpful, I suggest giving it, rather than just stewing in that wonder of why people aren't doing exactly what you need in any given moment. Because often the reason is that they just don't know what that thing is.
Yeah, I mean, I know for sure that I have certainly been to enough funerals. I've been to enough hospital rooms and gone through enough illnesses to know that people want something, and even the person going through it can't even express it well. And the person going to see these situations, they don't know what to do. And so that's the reason I say that if you just ask them, how can I help? Or is there anything
how can I help?
How can I help? Because it might just be a hug, or as you say, it might be shopping for groceries. It might be getting someone to clean their house. It might be taking a kid for an evening or an afternoon somewhere. I mean, there are so many different scenarios that could be that I think that it's a very key factor of, knowing what to do. I mean, and of course, when someone's in grief, they're not thinking right either. They're not thinking straight. They've got all these scenarios going off in their own head, and it just depends on so many things, and it also depends on their support system and what they have, because some have a huge family that take up everything you could possibly want to help with, and then there are people who are alone. So all of this goes into how a person deals with it. So I guess I would ask you, we have about 4 minutes left. How
Mm-hmm.
has the reaction to the book been? What are some of the comments from just ordinary people who have read it? What have the comments been like?
I mean, it's been incredibly gratifying, even just reading Amazon reviews from people I don't know at all. And just like, I'm so gratified to see that it's touching so many lives. One thing we've been doing is a lot of book events across the country, including obviously the Miami Book Fair. But at some of these events, we've been doing live storytelling events where people, either both contributors to the book and just people who have stories to tell, share their stories in a mock-style storytelling hour. But wherever we go, whether we know people or not, like we were in St. Paul, for example, and we got 80 people there, and we know exactly 2 people in St. Paul. And it's just amazing to see, as it was amazing to see with the website as well, that people feel like they are exhaling, that they can talk about this stuff, that this is an outlet for them. One of our contributors to the book, Helen Chernikoff, who wrote about having several miscarriages, called this book a support group in book form. And when we travel around the country, that's really what we're seeing. We're seeing people who feel compelled to share their own stories with us, who feel compelled to share their own stories with their loved ones, to write for us. And yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is just a lot of energy around the movement. We always say that community forms at the intersection of vulnerability and empathy. People who are willing to share their stories and people who are willing and able to hear them. And what we've really found is that this book is a book, it's a support group, and it's a community.
Well, that's super. And Gabrielle will be at the book fair, and will Rebecca be there with you?
She will be, yes.
So both Gabrielle and Rebecca will be at the book fair. If you are going to be attending the Miami Book Fair, which I strongly suggest, look up when they will be there. They usually have a schedule posted, and you can figure out, do I want to go to see them? Do I want to go to hear them? Do I want to go and ask some questions? I mean, they're open to whatever it is that you particularly need to cover. I think, I don't know if this started out for you, Gabrielle, as a therapy project, or it ended up being a fulfilling project, but evidently it's something that people needed, which is wonderful. Because I've done book signings and things like that, and to get 80 people to a book signing is just amazing, because usually
we had 250 in New York, which was incredible. I just gave the example of St. Paul because the people who had come out to see us were strangers.
Right, and I mean, even at 80, I mean, usually it's 10. So I think that you both have done extremely well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and in between now and then, we have our website where we have new content going up constantly at modernlost.com.
Well, that's wonderful to know as well. Yeah, go to their website, modernlost.com, see what they keep adding. And if you know somebody who's going through grief, recommend this book to them, Modern Loss, and also recommend the website to them. I know it will be very, very helpful. Well, I want to really thank you, Gabrielle, for everything that you've told us today, and good luck at the book fair, and best wishes in the future to both you and Rebecca.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. I choose my guests carefully, so if you have someone you'd like me to interview, please drop me a line at gailcarson13@gmail.com. In the meantime, check out my intro program, Mindset Matters, at www.sobmindset.com. See you next week.